It's finally happening! Savvas Games has announced Gloomhaven 2nd Edition. Oh my goodness, it's so exciting. Everyone's favorite card-based dungeon crawler and my second favorite game of tops and bottoms is getting a revision. While the game is clearly well received and wildly successful and immensely popular in even outside of the dungeon crawler scene, which is normally very small, Gloomhaven has gotten a lot of popularity, even extending into electronic formats on the form of Gloomhaven Digital as well. And even Gloomhaven's biggest fangirl, myself, has made it note that from some storytelling elements and some balance elements, there is room for improvement, and now we have that. The new starters look fresh and refined, there's updated abilities and even art and so much more. So today we're only going to be focusing on the starting classes and specifically their level 1 cards and what's changed. If you want to be kept up to date in all things Gloomhaven 2nd Edition, be sure to subscribe, as well as all the other Frosthaven content we're going to be releasing as well. Be sure to like because it really helps. And if you really want to support us, check us out on Patreon for early access to videos. So why do we need it? One of the things I just want to focus on is some people see like a 2nd edition and go, we already had this. What's the scope of it? Why do we need it? And I don't want to really focus on necessarily the scope of what all an entire revision could cover, but I just want to focus on the classes themselves. From the amount of times I've just generated tier lists and say, hey, look at the imbalance of all of these classes, there definitely wasn't a consistent balance in Gloomhaven. Several of the starters, especially the ones that were started earlier in development, such as the Brute, were kind of supposed to be the baseline for balance, but through design and coming up with new ideas, as it always tends to happen, there's some power creep unless you have a lot of systems in check. It was still relatively small scale. They didn't have a large team at the time and didn't have the ability to call in on a huge group of playtesters. So of course there's going to be some balance issues. Specifically, there are like 3 classes, and especially one of those 3 in particular that can just take over scenarios, or like, it doesn't matter if all my allies exhaust, I'll solo the rest of it because my class can just do that. It's just not a good system of balance. Whereas some of the earlier classes that didn't really get revisions later, who were designed, such as like the Brute and Tinkerer, kind of felt like they were missing some of those cool stuff that the later classes got. So I'm not going to be talking about those locked classes, but even amongst the starters, you can see that, first off, I think personally they stick to those core values of what are important to the class, and almost all the cards stuck through between editions, which is great. Because they should seem familiar and should seem fun and tangibly just like you played before, but usually better, or the playstyle's been improved. For example, I personally don't think this Mindthief is better in terms of power. When I use the air quotes because this version of the Mindthief is better in versatility and better of options of play. Playstyle is more dynamic and interesting rather than very samey play cycle. And ultimately, I feel like that's going to be better. I do think overall, its capacity is worse, whereas most of the other starters are just overall better. Let's just get into the cards. And first, we're going to be talking about the Brute. So taking a look at the cards one at a time, Trample hasn't changed much. There's some cards that just don't have equivalents anymore because they've been removed, but let's go over the cards that should look familiar. Trample does literally exact as it was before. So there's been a lot of revisions from class to class, and we're going to get to one of the more drastic changes later. But Trample is just an all-around better than its original version. Attack 3 goes attack 3 for both tops, and the Pierce goes from 2 to 3. Pretty basic. And the bottom is still a jump 4 that you attack every enemy you move through, but instead of an attack 2 and gain 2 experience, it's an attack 3 and gain 1 experience for every enemy you move through, which gives very good burst potential. I personally already enjoyed the bottom, but it was just the attack 2 sometimes felt a little lacking, so this one's definitely feels a lot better. Personally, I think Trample is definitely one of those cards that a lot of Brutes wanted to bring anyway, because that bottom, when you can line up the ability to get advantage for an attack ability, or just the ability to like strengthen self, so like a lot of things, dump a power potion into it. Sometimes they pulled off really big turns, and those are some of the more memorable moments. So keeping some of those key cards in there is really important. So this one's overall just a buff. Eye for an eye. So instead of Retaliate 2 for the whole round, it's Shield 1, Retaliate 1 for the whole round, and it still gives you 1 experience. Pretty small change, but personally I think it's better. Retaliate 2 is really cool. just being able to punch back 2 every time. But there's just a lot of times where when you want to retaliate, you also want to defend up. So personally, it's a little bit more defense and lacking in trait of offense, but I personally think that's just a great trait as is. The bottom no longer allows you to heal adjacent allies, but you heal yourself instead. But instead of a heal 2, it's a heal 3. But a heal 3 bottom on this class is significant, to the point where a lot of these are just numeric values. Let's actually jump into one of the bigger changes. Provoking Roar. Still initiative 10, which is fantastic, but instead of an attack 2 disarm, there's an attack 3 push 3. But if we take a look at warding strength, we have an attack 2 disarm there. So some of the cards' abilities have just been moved around. But Provoking Roar, now, first off, attack 3, push 3, and 1 experience. Yeah. Attack 3, push 3, 1 experience at Inish 10 is already very good. So moving the disarm to another card is still keeps the toolkit of the brutes about the same as it was, but clearly it's now on a worse initiative. But the bottom, on the other hand, allows you to take the hits for people while also building in a shield 1. The cool part is you can pair this with some of your other shielding cards, like the bottom of Warding Strength, which we'll talk about next, or the top of Eye for an Eye, or put that all in play at once. Because if you have all 3 of those cards in play for 1 turn, you actually get Shield 3, Retaliate 3 for the remainder of that round and or until you run out of Warding Strength charges. But Shield 3, Retaliate 3 for a round, and being able to go to Initiative 10 while doing it. This is the tanky brute I think we've always wanted. I personally wanted to use the bottom of Provoking Roar more when we were playing, but it just felt like someone's going to take the damage anyway. Why me? I usually will only sometimes have a bit of a shield, but building shield 1 into it drastically improves its viability and makes it so much fun. And Warding Strength also has that bit of a switcheroo. Instead of the attack 3 push 2, that seems to be moved to Provoking Roar. So we've lost that there, but instead we do get the attack 2 disarm. The 32 initiative still isn't bad, but it's not necessarily great. It's still good enough to undercut most enemy initiatives, though. On the other hand, though, if you do want to play the persistent bottom of Warding Strength, now you have to lose a disarm instead of a push, so there's a little bit more of value lost in that. Additionally, when you do want to play the ability to take soak hits for other people, you aren't losing that disarm. So that was like partially the one reason you're like, well, I can soak hits for people, or I can disarm things. The disarm always won. It's just you never used the bottom because of that, even when you wanted to. But now you have different trade-offs. You can do a big push or take the hits for people. You can disarm or give yourself a buff for the next 6 attacks. And instead of shield 1 for the next 6 attacks, it's shield 1, retaliate 1 for the next 6. Which is huge. And keep in mind, due to the phrasing of it, it says the next sources of damage from attacks. So keep in mind that if someone attacks you and draws a null, they're not going to get the shield nor the retaliate. The funny part about this is there were times where we wanted this retaliate, like, oh, this guy's out like 1 health, he's just going to bounce off me. But then he drew a negative and was no longer able to deal damage, so the retaliate didn't kill him, so we actually had to spend an attack to kill him. So it's good and bad, but overall it's a good... you will feel the impact of these 2 cards changing like this. Skewer has moved from an X to a 1 card because, frankly, it is a little bit more of a primary and commonly used card. Although the bottom used to be a move 6, now it's a move 7. It's a minor change, but being able to have this burst movement is huge, especially with Balanced Measure, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The top and the initiative should look the same. They are, almost. Skewer used to just give 1 experience regardless, but now you do need the element to get the experience. However, if you do have wind, the top's exactly as it was and the bottom's just the same as it was, but 1 more move. Still great. Overwhelming Assault. Overwhelming Assault has stolen the move from Leaping Cleave. Now it's a jump 3, fantastic, and infuse wind. The part that's really cool about this is Overwhelming Assault was one that was harder to use because sometimes you wanted the bottom and sometimes not, but jump 3, infuse wind is something you're really never going to not want, but now just an attack 702 experience. It's kind of boring, but sometimes you just need a generic jump move with a potential to say, all right, now I'm at the end of the scenario, let's bust out some damage, and this is it. Attack 7 is a little ahead of the curve because usually they try to value it around 6, but 6 is generally boring unless you do. It's fine. It's fine. But this is just having a different bottom just brings the value of this card up tremendously. And speaking of Leaping Cleave, as you can see, the top hasn't changed, and Overwhelming Assault and it have just swapped bottoms. This is fine because the push on Overwhelming Assault previously, now on Sweeping Cleave, it used to be kind of situational, but now you have a move that has a push, which is something you generally want, but also a cleave with experience, which is something you generally do. They're both halves are good, but they may not be 100% useful all of the time. As a result, both cards, the Leaping Cleave isn't going to be used less, but Overwhelming Assault will be brought more as a result. Both of the cards, Leaping Cleave was always viable, and it didn't lose viability in this change, whereas Overwhelming Assault did become more viable. And I like it when we have cards where the viability of them just improve overall of the class, rather than saying, well, these other ones suck, so just pick these cards. Balanced measure hasn't changed. Wrong! The initiative has. It's 20. That's it. That's all that's changed. The different movement values of the Brute has definitely been a little bit more, especially as we get to higher levels, but we can't talk about those yet. They'll eventually let me. But the change in moving patterns of the Brute is just going to be notable because of this. And I know, like, some people would like set up skewer with this, and like to say, okay, move 6, attack 6. Now it's a move 7, attack 7 with this, so on and so forth, especially if you compare this with like certain boots. But just having a better initiative on it, because sometimes you needed the early initiative. Unfortunately, this class definitely suffers a little bit in this regard, but being able to do like early multi-attacks and then say, hey, I did a bunch of damage, now I can jet the hell out because of the bottom of this, made the bottom a bit more reliable. Grab and go. Now the loot has a heal 2 moved into it. That's it! Hooray! No, seriously, that's it. But I do like the idea of, especially something we saw in Frosthaven, where the loots had other things built into them, especially on the Blink Blade, which had 2 loots that were both very useful. You have like the Banner Spear who can move and loot. You have the Deathwalker, which can teleport and loot. I just love all of these changes, but this one still stays on top. You can pick stuff up and heal yourself while still using a bottom, which you can use to move. So being able to like keep moving in this, and plus it still retains the bottom of the universally good move 4. Shield Bash. The only thing that's changed on it is the bottom now has a move 2 on it. This is huge. It's interesting because like when we saw Swift Strength when the Red Guard came out, we're like, okay, so this is a jump 2 with shield oneself, and the Brute just has a shield oneself with nothing for 1 initiative. Like, this doesn't feel fair. And I know the Red Guard and Brute have different values of what shield gives, but man, the Brute's shield bash bottom just felt like trash. So them giving the Brute a move 2 on the bottom of this is huge. The funny part about this is, because sometimes in combat you do kind of just want to use like, well, I just want to go early and I'm going to move 2. This one gives you, well, I just want to go early and I'm going to move 2 with that critical 15 undercut with the shield still on it, which makes the card actually viable. The top still gives you, hey, a level 1 stun. Of course, it's with a loss, but this is one of those where it's okay to bring. The problem was the bottom was just harder to use, to the point where people said, why bring it? And now you have it. The top's still useful in some of those where I need to stun this guy, but the bottom's always going to be useful because you'll need that initiative undercut, although you have it on another card. But this one also brings you shield and movement on a card, whereas the other one brings you shield and the ability to pull attacks from others, but no movement. So between that and Provoking Roar, you have some options, and both of which are good for different purposes. Spare Dagger only has 2 changes. The bottom now has Pierce on it, which is great. It's only a little bit of Pierce, but you know, that's nice. And the top doesn't no longer give experience. Given that there's experience put in other places now, that's fine. It just means that instead of throwing daggers to get experience, you have to focus on more some of the multi-attacks, some of the retaliating, and so on and so forth. Or pushing, bullying enemies, so to speak. This is very important because giving the Brute a bottom attack while also giving the Brute retaining its ranged attack is just really important to the toolkit. And as we get to higher levels, which we won't talk about in this video, you still get to retain the ability to have both of those options. So I'm glad we were able to keep this in at level 1. This is just a useful level 1. Sweeping Blow. So it's an X now, and it's got a move 4 on bottom. It's got a move 4 on bottom. That's such a good change. That's something we just absolutely love to see. The top was harder to use because Leaping Cleave, getting 2 enemies next to each other, very easy. Getting 3 enemies in that line, a little bit more difficult. So this one still gives you attack 2, and it gives you 1 experience. But it also muddles all enemies in that 3-arc cone, and every enemy who's undamaged, you get +1 attack on. So this one's better and worse than Leaping Cleave. It's situationally better, situationally worse. And the bottom is nice general move 4. Ultimately, for an X, this is definitely a more universal card. But that top may not be as good if you're playing in 2-player or in certain scenarios. And then if you do actually need to use the move 4, or good moves, you actually have a different option. Grab and Go is just universally useful. So I can see why this was pushed to X, but ultimately you can kind of see that versatility of this attack, now sometimes it will outclass Leaping Cleave, and that's cool. And for the other X, for one other X card, we did already talk about Provoking Roar, and obviously that one's still good. And the last card, Wall of Doom, farewell. It was nice knowing you. I didn't like you very much. But instead, we get Cut Over here. Wonderful Mortal Kombat reference here. You pull an enemy, pull 2 within range 3, and muddle them. Then for the rest of the turn, you get Retaliate 2. This is also pairs very well with a lot of your shield cards on the bottom. So if you're able to get an enemy towards you, muddle them, and then punch them back. But you also get Retaliate and 2, and then get experience. Of course, if you're expecting to get hit, you should bring some heals and shields to mitigate this. So it's a little bit situational. And the bottom is a move 2 that pulls 2 as well. So this one's you're going to pull but then gain melee Retaliate. The bottom, you're going to move and then pull. So sometimes you do, sometimes you don't want that. So of course this is a good reason why it's an X. But there's going to be so many scenarios in which this is going to be viable, and including if you are going to focus on a shield or Retaliate build, this will be a core card for you. Quick thoughts on the Brute. I personally think that these changes are significant. I think that this makes it to where you now have a Retaliate build option. You have plenty of AoE options. Your burst damage is still there, and you have the ability to set it up just as you were before, but now you have the ability to also be versatile while still being able to bully enemies a bit more. Now, I know some people are saying this class doesn't seem to synergize much with pushes, pulls, and it's possible that there's a higher card later that does, but ultimately, just looking at scenarios, being able to like knock them away distances and move away, it's giving you that measure of control. Sometimes you'll just be able to push them out of range and miss attacks. So you'll still be able to control enemies a bit, hit lots of enemies that are grouped up, and or being able to do lots of damage on command, recover, and shield up. It's a good toolkit. Tinkerer. I know this is obviously one of the class I've made fun of constantly, but not gonna lie, I think the Tinkerer is one of the best starters now. Potent Potables. This card that I never thought was good is now pretty solid. Attack 3, range 3, muddle. It's hard to complain about that. It gives you a solid attack. It's moved from X to 1, and of course, the top used to be the buff, and now the top is just a useful attack. It's kind of hard to complain about that because muddle is generally useful, but just an attack 3, range 3 is fine. But the bottom says for your next 4 heals, instead of add +2 to the heals, add another target. So you have some of those like heal 4s and stuff. So instead of heal 4 1 target, heal 4 to 2 targets or stuff like that really starts to pick up. This one no longer adds roughly about 8 points of healing, but this one very easily becomes 12 or more healing. Note, it does say single target heals, so it won't like burn it on some of your weaker heals. Harmless Contraption now has a move 4 instead of a heal 2, which is fine because move 4s are generally useful. It's been moved here. But instead of a 6 health move 2 decoy, you have a 10 health 3 move 3 experience decoy. But the 10 health on a level 1 loss, it soaks up a lot, because usually it doesn't soak up, like it's usually not at 3 health and takes 3 damage at the end. Usually it'll like take 1 or 2 damage of oversoak. So this usually often adds up to you spend a loss preemptively, and then for the next several turns, enemies beat up on it for a little bit, or for the next couple turns, but a group of enemies beat up on this while they soak it. It soaks up like, I don't know, 11, 12 damage normally while you're able to beat up on those enemies. That's just been a lifesaver. Like I never thought this was necessarily a bad card. Just like it soaks up a couple, 2, 3 attacks and then it's gone, and it just felt like well, for a loss in a thing, it's just harder to time that correctly. And sometimes on some bad rolls, it would just eat one attack and you'd be like, oh crap. And that always felt disappointing. This one, it's just harder for it to only soak one attack. So it ends up soaking several attacks, and the increased move and increased experience just has value built into it. Plus the bottom with a move 4, solid. Flamethrower. So that initiative 16 is nice, isn't it? Now the shield aura on a 47 meant like, well, you need to pair this with other cards. You don't need to worry about it anymore. You've got it. This already has a good enough initiative for it. Fantastic. The top should look familiar. It gives you fire if you want it, but it also attack 3 wound in that pattern, and instead of 2 experience, it gives 3 experience, but also it has pierce 2. So if you need to melt those, like, I know one thing I hate is like those living spirits, or sometimes, I mean, there's so many annoying things. But just saying, hey, all of you get wounded and I'm ignoring your shields this round, this just melts them. It's crazy how much I thought Flamethrower has some uses, it's all right. And now I'm like, Flamethrower is a must-bring card, right? It's very good. Disorienting Flash. So this was a level 2 card and now it's a level 1 card, but better. See, I used to make fun of like the Tinkerer, you're going to laugh that your level 2 cards are like as good as your level 1. Yeah, this is what I mean. But instead of 2 experience, you get 1 experience per enemy targeted, and instead of target 2, you get target 3. Being able to stun 3 enemies, huge. Light isn't something that's super what you're going to use, but you could potentially give it to an ally. But also, the bottom is where you've got that heal now. So instead of having it on Harmless Contraption, you now have this heal 2 on the bottom of this. So you can bring a situational stun loss with a ranged heal bottom. This makes this so much more useful. Plus, it doesn't feel weird taking it as a level 2 card because now you have it on your level 1 toolkit. Ink Bomb. The initiative's 80 instead of 74. Not a big deal. And now it muddles. That's it. That's it. That's the only change. Yep. And I already liked Ink Bomb, so I'm not like, oh no, they didn't change it much. No, you didn't need to. Add model, cool. Change the initiative by 6, it doesn't matter. It's at a point where it's not really going to mean much. We can move on. This card's still good. Net Shooter. Another card that didn't change much, which is great because the Net Shooter is another one honestly, I felt like the bottom was harder to use, and guess what? Now it's immobilize and move 3. Notably better. It's weird how you will notice that like this just becomes a little bit more usable. It's a little bit harder to use, but just in general, turning it into ignore the other thing, a move 3 without the immobilize is good. It just feels better. And the top is already fantastic. The initiative fits pretty well. This is just a good card now. Long range immobilize also gains more value in a system where we are, if you weren't imagining this, like what we saw in Frosthaven, changing some of the ability to have access to hard crowd control. You're going to see that in Gloomhaven 2nd Edition as well, where there's going to be fewer non-loss level 1 hard crowd control. So giving access to the AoE immobilize is still huge. Stun Shot. So remember, like, hey, we have a move 4 now. This is where the move 4 came from. Stun Shot lost its move 4. It's still at initiative 20, which is good. But now it has a the Tinkerer only had a lost loot at level 1 before. Now it has a non-lost loot. Move 1, loot 1, just like the Banner Spear's bottom card in its toolkit. However, the top is slightly worse than before, but still amazing. Honestly, stun at range 3, non-lost stun, is always going to be incredibly powerful. The Tinkerer still having this in its toolkit and not losing a non-loss range stun is valuable. So good. But now I don't attack 1 in it, and once you get your attack modifier, it doesn't matter. This card's still incredibly strong. Yes, it got nerfed, and it's still very good. It got nerfed, and it's still very good. I feel like that says a lot. Reinvigorating Elixir. Instead of a heal 3, it's a heal 4. Not a big change. Also, we can clearly see the Diamond Plus pip on that, which is really nice. But heal 4, super useful. With Potent Potables, heal 4, target 2. Fantastic. The bottom is exactly as it was before, but instead of 2 experience, 3. 3 experience. Fantastic. Thank you, Tinky, for giving us... You have to play losses to get Tinker on the... If you weren't aware, you have to burn out all losses just to like level up on this class. On the other hand, though, instead of an adjacent ally recovers their entire discarded stack, range 3... Do you know how many times it was like, I can't move, but if you move next to me, I can allow you to... It just never panned out. This is so much better. I cannot overstate how much like the effect was always good, but it was just hard to use. Now the effect's good and it's just easier to use. It's not like super powerful. It's still strong. It doesn't feel nearly as annoying as it did before to use, and it just makes it more fun. And that's what matters. Restorative Mist. The heal on top went up by 1. There's not much else to say here, but this does pair well with Potent Potables. It's a good card. Again, with the Diamond Plus Pip, though. People are like, hey, Jet Propulsion, what's that? If you didn't level, for some reason, your Tinkerer to level 8, this is that card on bottom, but it's a level 1 card. Yes, your level 8 bottom is now a level 1 bottom. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at the word bottom again. But the top does give you attack 2, target 2, range 3, which is just taken from Reviving Shock. But giving you a multi-target is solid, and then having that jump is great. It's also better than, oh my god, just having a move 6 on a bottom with nothing else on the Tinkerer just always felt weird, and I was like, this is hard to use. Sometimes you found uses for it, but this feels so much better. Thank you, Jet Propulsion, from jumping down from level 8 to level 1. We'll always remember you for that. I'm assuming most people didn't realize that there was like cards for the Tinkerer above level 7. I mean, also, even at that level, people are taking harsh stimulants. No one's looking at Jet Propulsion. Enhancement Field. So this is my new favorite card. The bottom's the same as it was before. The initiative's the same as it was before. But what changed? The attack that used to be attack 3, range 3. Clearly the attack 3, range 3 got Muddle added to it and moved to Potent Potables. But now you have this FUD aura. So you just place a token on there. For 3 experience, put a token down. It's not a summon that like can be targeted. You just put a token down. It lasts for the rest of the scenario. Anyone, you and all your allies while in that hex or adjacent to that hex, have +1 to all attacks forever. Now, you can't move that token, sure, but like, just say you're like, oh crap, the last room looks rough. Don't worry, the door is an attack buff now. Don't worry, this first room that looks brutal, let's all get an attack buff. It's seriously so strong. I love this so much, especially if you pair this with multi-attackers. Like, one of my favorite things is like, oh no, my Spellweaver is going to drop some like target 3, target 4 stuff. What if all those attack 3s and 4s became attack 4s and 5s now? Ah, yeah. So good. So good. Big nerf here, giving it a 76 initiative. Part of why Toxic Bolt used to be good before was the 18 initiative. But we can clearly see now the bottom gives you 3 experience instead now and has an attack 6. Attack 6 at range 2 on bottom. Fantastic. I always wanted this to be range 3, but frankly, I think if it was range 3, you couldn't have that same attack value. The top's still good. It's still strong. Even with that initiative, this is still a very usable card because poisoning enemies is something, if you need to hit an enemy with high health and bring it down, this gives you that in your toolkit. Not only that, but Earth is, you know, everyone loves their craggy friends. So having a way to say, hey, Cragheart, did you need Earth? And the Cragheart will almost always say, yes. That's hard to do now. Gas Canister, create a 4 damage Muddle Trap. If this looks familiar, this is your level 6 card. But what did we nerf to bring that top down to level 6? Nothing. We didn't change it. Your level 6 card is now a level 1 card. I've said it so many times about the Tinkerer's level up cards about like, man, do they feel like level 1 cards? They are. Now, look at it. It's a level 1 card now. And the bottom is a very universal move 4. So this card just got better. I know Gas Canister's bottom on before was still, you can clearly see, has some really cool uses. But ultimately, now it becomes useful. You may not always want to drop a trap. You move 4 is generally useful, but you still have other options for move 4s. But in the instance that certain areas might have a lot of obstacles, or if you have the ability to like pair this with a Cragheart and force people into strange paths, and then eventually clog them off into a 4 damage muddle, this has some uses. The initiative 22 is also fairly solid. Volatile Concoction. Honestly, swapping it does so much. Being able to drop a trap in front of you can actually save your ass. The initiative 18 is also huge. I know, like, rest in peace Toxic Bolt, but like being able to drop a trap in front of you could potentially like make an enemy go, oh, I need to move 1 more hex, and just, it can potentially save a hit. Alternatively, you might be able to use this 2 damage poison trap. It's got uses. Now the top, Here's part I love about it. It no longer requires ice, in which most people are like, wait, how do I get ice on my tanker? Like, it just felt so out of place. Now you can't potentially get an ally to recover 2 cards, but instead of a bottom, it's a top. So you have to make it a little bit better, but you do that by giving it strengthen. Strengthen, given how it's harder to get it now, having non-loss strengthen and being able to pair this with an early initiative and say, hey, I can go early and give you advantage. So someone's like, hey, I'm going to do a big thing. Like, what if your boot's going to do? It's trample. It's like, I'm going to use trample and use my boots. Oh boy, I'm going to hook you up with advantage on all that, and that's going to be amazing. Thank you, Tinky. Hook guns moved from 1 to X. The card's not different. However, the bottom used to be a loot 2, and now it's a move 2, loot 2. So move 2, loot 2. That's pretty solid for a level 1 loss, especially for a class with like, you know, a 12 hand size. This allows you to position yourself correctly, just scoop up a whole room if you do need to clean up. The funny part about this is sometimes when we were testing this, we would get to like final rooms and someone would be like, okay, well, we'll do some cleanup, because we'd play on like harder difficulty and then be like, oh crap, we don't have enough time to loot. And the Tinkerer could always be like, all right, for my last turn, I'm going to do this. We're good. I'm going to move over here and scoop everything up. And it always felt like they could use this reliably. Now, it depends on like a lot, because sometimes we just completely demolish the scenario and never needed to use the loot. And you do need to, like, this does make some of your traps easier to use, but sometimes you don't want to bring the traps. So of course we can see why this is more of an X card now. Regardless, the Tinkerer's Toolkit is just so much more powerful now. I personally think that these changes make it more valuable. And once you get to the level 2 plus cards, since you know we pulled some of those level 2, 6, and 8 cards down to level 1, I just be very excited once you hit level 2. This class is just, it feels so great now. I mean, coming from a person that didn't like Tinkerer, this class is great now. Everyone's favorite little fire starter, the Spellweaver. Oh my goodness. So I'm so, let's get it. I'm excited for her. Our AoE damage queen. So Reviving Aether should look familiar except one change. Instead of infusing dark, guess what? You infuse one element of your choice. And that's big because this class that relies a lot on elements and an element tempo, which it still does, now you can set up and say, hey, I'm going to recover my cards. You're going to have a crap ton of cards in hand. And now you get to have, you know, fire or ice, we're going to just say, of your choice. And the bottom's still the universal jump 4. And the initiative 80, in my opinion, is great because this allows you to do big moves late and set up early turns later. So just as good as before. If people are like, oh, did they change the Spellweaver too much? I think the non-change on Reviving Aether outside of the element should say that if you liked how it played before, you will at least like it now, but you'll probably love it because this class... I think someone outside doesn't know how to drive a car. Okay. If you liked it before, you're going to love it now because it's like, did you enjoy it? Congrats, it's better. So Fire Orbs no longer gives you 1 experience per enemy targeted, but it's still attack 3, target 3, range 3, and infuse fire, which is great. Still has the 69 initiative, nice. But the bottom is a move 4 now instead of move 3. Not a big change. Your experience will be a little bit more reliant on some of the other methods, but ultimately, if you wanted the damage value, then occasionally you needed the bottom to move 4, which, given the fact that you will recover this and go through a couple hand cycles, you sometimes did want to use the bottom just to move. So going from a move 3 to a move 4, solid, and still retaining as good the strength it had before, solid. Arcane Bolt. So this should be an example, by the way, for cultural sensitivity. So we're no longer using Mana Shaman and several other words that ultimately are just cultural appropriation. That already happened in Frosthaven. So if you didn't notice it, you didn't notice it. So if you like Mana Bolt, here's Arcane Bolt. Now some people are like, oh, I love the 7 initiative. Wait, that's not a 7. That's a 7D. What happened? I know. The core card's still very good. Instead of having to use an element to get attack 3, it's attack 3 by default now. It's got a diamond pip, which if you watched my enhancement video, I always like to hype those up, but you still get to convert an element into boosting this now to an attack 4 and get experience, which is huge. The bottom used to be a heal, which was good, but the biggest thing is there was a pip on it that led you to strengthen yourself. That's not there now. But now there's an attack 4 at range on bottom, which is huge. But if you have fire with the ability to do this, you have now an attack 5, pierce 3 with 1 and 2 experience with fire on bottom. Just a heads up, with the reliability of your ability to infuse fire, attack 5, pierce 3. Oh, you could just melt things, and that's your bottom. So then you can use the top attack to still apply damage. You now have very good single target burst potential, because I know some people were like, well, you know, I didn't like the Spellweaver because like the single target wasn't good, but I did like blowing things up. No, you've got it now. You have that punch, and you're like, well, it's a loss. Yeah, you're a Spellweaver. Do it twice. Flame Strike, what's this? Instead of 36, 26, which is a decent change. 36, I'm usually not a fan of that range. 26 is an improvement. Hey, strengthen self and loot self. Loot 1. Loot 1. Loot self just sounds... That's my bad. Anyway, strengthen self, loot 1. Fantastic, especially if you need a setup turn. Let's say you are between rooms and you're about to like kick open the door. Strengthen yourself, or let's say you do need to use like a bottom attack. This can help do that. Let's say you need a loot. There's so many uses for it now. Now, I'm not saying that the top was bad before. The top was fine, but there's just other better attacks we have in the toolkit. Whereas now the bottom is better. It's worse because it used to be attack 2, range 2. Now it's attack 1, range 3. Ultimately, the range 2 was usually more of a prohibitive factor, so I like this a lot better. But if you have fire, attack 2, wound, range 3 on bottom with an experience. So if you have the ability to set up, hey, I infused fire, now I blow this up with Flame Strike, you're good. But it doesn't matter because the top is also good because you have a loot and a strengthen. So you can use a strengthen yourself, then blow one of your AoE losses and have advantage. It's so good. I love this class so much because you now have better control over the tempo because you have some of these setup turn cards rather than, well, they're all movement and all blow up. And now some people are like, wait, there was the one setup. Yeah, and you needed to infuse wind and there's only one way to do that. I didn't like it. I'm just saying. Icy Blast is a level 2 card that's now level 1. You know, we're going to see that theme a little bit. But it's got initiative 20 improvement. And if you see, instead of having the heal 6, it now has a move 4. So first off, love the move 4 with the conditional top. Instead of giving you 2 experience and giving you ice, this one needs ice now. So it did suffer a nerf from going from 2 to 1. But it actually got better because it is an attack 2 in the 7 pattern hex. But now with ice, it's an attack 3 in that 7 pattern hex. Still muddles, and if you did consume ice as part of it, it's still the 2 experience. So huge, wonderful card. This is very good if you can set that up. But even then, move 4 is something you're always going to want to do. And you can clearly see, like, hey, for mobility reasons, the Spellweaver looks really good now. The answer is yes. They have that burst mobility, and it's fantastic. The cool part is, since you have these burst mobilities, when you were looking at Flame Strike and Arcane Bolt, you can clearly see now you have bottom attacks. So now you have bursts of movements and you use top bottoms that are just large turns. This means that you have multiple ways of having impact turns that aren't just, well, I played a loss. You have the ability to set these things up in the right pattern. 8 from the Ether. It's like, wait, that's not a summon. Did you think we were going to keep the most powerful level 1 summon? Honestly, it beat most of the summons in the game. If you expected that to be retained, lower your expectations. But now the initiative's 36. It still has the heal on top, but now the heal allows you to consume any elements to make it a heal 4-1 experience. Pretty solid. Now I know some people are like, well, this is worse than the Tinkerer, just got 4 experience, 4 heal normal. Yeah, but this one slightly better on the 1 experience side. The whole point is you're going to have to burn losses to generate elements. You're going to have to use those elements in creative ways, and then you can do it all over again. It's just part of the attack cycle now. You're going to have to find ways to infuse those elements. And speaking of ways to infuse those elements, there is a move 3, and then if you perform a loss action this round, you get to infuse the element of your choice. The cool part about this is let's say you did play this with fire orbs. You move 3 up, you blow them up with fire orbs, but now you generate fire and ice. So next turn, now you can use like to set up a top and a bottom action for, like, for example, you could use Arcane Bolt and Flame Strike to use that for the ice for the top to make an attack 4, and use the bottom to do an attack 2 with attack 2 with wound. Now you have just so many ways of using this in creative purposes. It's awesome. The bottom for this is just very good. This card is definitely one of the ones I got to pick a lot. So these next few cards should look a little bit different. Frost Strike, Ember Frost, and Flame Swell. Flame Swell, one part of it should look somewhat familiar though. But first, let's talk about Frost Strike. Frost Strike's bottom is very familiar with the move 3 that, like Aid from the Ether, gives you a bonus. Unlike Aid from the Ether, which allows you to infuse an element if you play a loss action, this one requires you to spend Flame, but then you get advantage on all your attacks this round and an experience. The really key part about this, first off, turning an element into experience, great, kind of keeps with the theme that you have to kind of keep the tempo of burn loss to get elements and then spend those elements. And you need several ways, top and bottom, to be able to spend those elements. But this actually sets it up really well if you want to infuse an element, consume it for a big loss attack, so you use this to get a big advantage, and then keep the tempo going, because you can pair this with one of those multi-target loss attacks to get advantage on all those attacks. It's pretty fantastic. Even if you just have Flame for just one thing and just want to get advantage on a single one, that's still fine too. It overall improves damage if you have Fire and then want to pair it with an attack that you want to land. Frost Strike's top, on the other hand, is a basic attack 2 at range 3, which is far weaker than the other attacks because if you look at it, hey, there's a non-loss stun. So if you have ice, you can consume it to stun the target. Frost Strike's top is a very weak attack that becomes incredibly powerful with ice. It also gives you, if you do want to go less offense, the top of Frost Strike allowing you to get a little bit more control and damage preventions, allow you to be a little bit more of a support weaver. And we haven't really gotten into a lot of ice generation. Guess what? Let's talk about Ember Frost next. Ember Frost, like, wait, what's that? This is your element generator for when you don't want to play losses, and it's good. And if you're like, hey, wait, what's that initiative? That's the 7 initiative, it's back. But it's on Ember Frost. It's on a weaker attack, but it's got Pierce. Attack 2, range 4, Pierce 1, and it gives you Fire, which is, this is just great. That's a great card. It's only with attack 2, but if you are attacking something with shield, this on an initiative 7, this card's definitely one of your better ones. On the bottom, however, you grant an ally shield 1, but not only that, granting an ally shield within range 3 and giving them shield 1 and giving you non-loss ice is huge. Now, the thing is, you're like, wait, these are your element generators, your fire and ice, that are non-loss at level 1 that are both tied to the same card, which means you're going to have to make a decision when you're infusing stuff. Are you going to go for ice this rest cycle or fire? Now, when resting, this one's one of the cards I held onto a lot because I know we're like, well, now if you like burn, one of the losses, then you don't no longer get the loss effect until you like reviving Ether. Trust me when I say this is just a card I would hold on to until like Reviving Ether, lose it before that rest, Reviving Ether, get everything back, and keep this in play. Just because of reliable element generation. This card's very good, and it still gives you that initiative 7, which is one of the best undercuts in the entire game. I think like only the Scoundrel really beats it at level 1. Fantastic. So this should look familiar. It should look like, crackling air. But instead of needing air, which is hard to generate for you, to go from +1 to +2, this one just gives you the +2 to all attacks without needing an element. And then when you do put this into play, you have fire. The cool part about this, by the way, is if you do need single target, this allows you to set up, boom, I have fire, and boom, now I have +2 to my next 4 attacks, which is huge if you do need to bring a boss down. So you can start using that for like Flame Strike, Arcane Bolt, and stuff like that, and just deal significant amounts of damage on command with this. Now, of course, you're like, well, that only applies to those situations where you need those, because if you're actually doing AoE and stuff, there are generally better options than this, but that's why this is an X card. Additionally, the 83 initiative on a non-move card is also, I'm not a big fan of, but if you are taking down bosses, this card now it's good now. It's crackling air made viable. The bottom does get useful though, because it is a heal too. This allows you to finally like recover and make your bottom actions useful for recovery. And if you have ice, it also allows you to ward. The ward's something we didn't have in Gloomhaven, but remember, this only adds up to like a couple, so this will usually block, on average, like heal 2, block 2 damage, and that's not bad, but you will need ice for that, and it does give you an experience if you do that. This is definitely one of those situational cards where if you do need to bring that extra support, this card is very good, because I'm not knocking the bottom. But especially if you use Ember Frost to protect people and then you set up the next turn to use this to heal them and ward them the next turn. There's really good support stuff you can do with this. So I'm not knocking that, but I'm just saying that it has its uses, and when it does, it's very good. Frost armor must become ice armor. It's a double loss. Naturally, that means, oh no, Alice is going to complain and say, oh, this card sucks. It doesn't. The bottom now is actually very specific, and it's instead of like the next 2 sources of damage, it's next 3 sources of damage. Great. Gives you experience on charge 1 and 3. Great. Gives you ice. Great. That shouldn't be familiar. But now, instead of blocking 2 sources of damage, it blocks 3 sources of damage. Also, the source of damage must be greater than 1. So you don't get like, oh, well, I take a damage, it blocked it. It just blocked the 1. Now, it can't block the 1. It has to block 2 or more. Also, the worst thing this can do, the worst thing that this can do, the worst, is it'll prevent 6 damage, give you 2 experience, and generate ice. And that's a worst case scenario. That makes this card very useful. Again, some groups, your Spellweaver is going to be so well protected, they're not going to need that. But if you need to protect others, take a look at the top. It's actually the same thing, but you can put it on an ally. And the nice part about this is, because this is a good setup between turns, being able to say, hey, Brute, I know you like playing those Retaliate cards, but like, what if you just did this like Retaliate 2, Retaliate 3 stuff, and like you ignored like the next 3 sources of damage? Because like, for example, Get Over Here doesn't give you any protection, but imagine you could just prevent some damage to them. Or let's say there is someone who is very hurt, and you're like, oh crap, they're in a dire predicament. Guess what? You have a few attacks that you can just get out of jail free card. That's super solid. And again, it still gives you ice, which is something you clearly need. But overall, because some of the other cards got a little bit more useful with their generic attacks and generic heals, we don't need the we no longer need the generic attack on Frost armor. So making ice armor have the protection on both sides and make them better just makes this more useful. Impaling Eruption. So this is no longer that come up with a creative path and then do attack 4 with ranged attacks, but the person in melee is gonna, or persons in melee are going to have disadvantage. No longer. It's now a melee attack, but it's also a melee attack with this very weird attack pattern, which feels kind of like on par for Impaling Eruption, but it also immobilizes everything. It does give you Earth, which is not something you really need. But keep in mind you have several cards that say consume any element. So because of that, this is still a pretty solid card. Additionally, the amount of hexes it covers and the fact that it's immobilize gives you a little, it's has the most potential, but it is harder to use. The initiative 91 is strong, and the move 4 is, guess what? It's got a move 4 on bottom. You don't need to bring all of those move 4s on your Spellweaver. Pick the ones that you think are going to be the most useful. Immobilize is very strong on this, but keep in mind, because it's going to be a little bit fringe, you might not be able to use this to its full potential. That said, it's a very strong card. Ranged immobilizes like this are always going to be pretty strong. And I know it's got like 6 hexes. You're probably not going to do that, but it is not that hard to actually hit 3 enemies with this. So go off, Queen. And that's it for the Spellweaver. Ultimately, the numbers just feel higher. The only difference is you can't rely on just babysitting and aid from the Ether Summon, but everything else is just better. Also, Ember Frost is fun. Scoundrel! She's just a girl with a knife. Yeah. Let's just jump into that. Single out. Take a look. The text is pretty particular here. So it's an attack 3, but it's an attack 5, 1 experience if the target has no friends next to it. This is fantastic. It does also fit the single out energy. The bottom was already pretty decent before. You could set it up and have +2 to certain things, but now you have +3 to your next 4 attacks, targeting enemies that are adjacent to none of its allies. Huge. The +2 already felt pretty solid. I didn't use it super often, but used it a bit. The bottom, just +3 to all of them. It's hilarious. I know it requires a bit of setup, but the Scoundrel's ability to perform attack gates at level 1 now. It's good. It's good. She's so cool. Flanking Strike literally didn't change, and we love that. I mean, obviously the format's different, but like, it's the same card. But like, let's be real, for a 9-card class, this already felt good. Nothing about this felt bad. It's fantastic. It's a conditional attack 5 with an unconditional move 5 on bottom on an ish 4. Yeah. Swift Bow has moved from X to 1. Attack 3 at range 4. Hooray! But the bottom, instead of move 2 and loot. See, the problem is, I remember back in the day, it was like move 4, loot every hex. I forgot the original version. Then it got nerfed to move 2. Now it's move 3 and loot every hex. And attack 3 at long range, and move 3 that can also give you loot. It's just very useful. Thieves' Knack. Now, no longer do you get a disarm trap on top, you get a loot and move on top. I mean, let's be real here. You have 2 loots already. People who like love the Scoundrel's ability to ninja loot are still like, oh my goodness, we didn't lose her. Loot Queen. Yeah, she's still the Loot Queen. Not that like I played with a Loot Queen in my group who kept on stealing stuff from me with my slow-ass Cragheart, and I was like, I need to get myself to get better armor, and then watching them go, bye, and I'm like, let's just say it was upsetting, okay? I eventually did get better armor, and I showed them up, because I'm just a clear Cragheart's still like, oh, he is my cool king. But anyway, the bottom is still attack 3 with 1 experience. Attack 3 on bottom with 1 experience is huge. Also, keep in mind, remember, if you do get single out and pair with an attack 5 and attack 3 on bottom like this, you can turn those very easily into attack 8, attack 6, and just watch you melt bosses or potentially like high health elites. It's hilarious. It's just hilarious. Sinister Opportunities moved from X to 1, but don't worry, that's because if you look, the bottom has changed to a move 5. Ah, that's great. The top is now no longer requires dark, which you only could set up from like smoke bomb. So that's good. But it's now changed to an attack 3. If the target has none of its friends next to it, +1 attack. If the target has one of your allies next to it, +1 attack. And if both are true, you get an experience and advantage. Attack 5, advantage, 1 experience. It requires a little bit more setup than your other ones, but oh boy, is that fun. Fantastic. This isn't just a good card. It's pretty easy because it has 2 conditions to get this to an attack 4, but it's not hard to get it to attack 5, 1 experience, and advantage. Venom Shiv. So that initiative 60 is dropped to 8. That's big. No longer does it give you experience, but now it has Pierce 1. So it's attack 3, poison, Pierce 1. Fantastic. And now the bottom says all of your ranged attacks this round get Pierce 2. So people are like, well, ranged attacks, that's kind of silly. Don't worry, we have stabby girl and ranged girl. Pew! She's got flintlock, you know. I don't know where she keeps it, but she has guns too. She has swords, she has daggers, she has shivs, she has guns. I don't know where she puts it all, and especially all the loot, but we can get creative. Fantastic card. This one brings a lot of versatility to the toolkit, and as well as this helps set up more of your ranged attacks if you do want to go for that build. Plus initiative 8, throwing knives. So remember I was talking about the range build? This card, the top hasn't changed. The top in the initiative hasn't changed, but the bottom of Smoke Bomb has been moved to here. Now you can pull an enemy next to you. So with throwing knives, you can either pull an enemy close, or you can toss 2 daggers, still getting an experience. Ultimately, still immensely useful. This one's especially good if you can pair it with single out and get a pair of attack 5s out. Again, this is you can set this up okay, but if you can get say 2 attack 2s is nice, but 2 attack 5s with Pierce 2 is incredible. Quick reflexes. This comes from what I'm assuming quick hands. Instead of move 2 attack 2, which felt a little weak. Now it's move 3, attack 3, which is great. The bottom is a move 3, and you can choose not to spring traps through this movement. But you can also disarm a trap that you move through. So instead of like a top that was like, hey, I disarm a trap, now you can use a bottom to move and disarm. Very good. Love this. Now you're like, well, we lost the loot off it. Don't worry, you got your loot on those other cards, which you clearly saw. Don't think that you're like, do I need another loot card? Yeah. Special Mixture now infuses dark. Okay. There's a Diamond Plus pip on it. There's not much else to say about it. It's here. It didn't change much. Backstab. Just when we thought we didn't need dark, there it is. So, and it still has the move 6, Inish 6 that we loved before, but now it's an attack 5 instead of like the attack 3, but potentially 2 more, but potentially 2 more. The attack 5 on the loss gives you no experience, but you get 1 experience for dark and 1 experience if there's no allies next to it. Still good. Smoke Bomb. So that bottom's really nice. Move 4, great. Initiative 12. Move 4 on initiative 12 is great. But then you pick an enemy next to you and force them to move 1 to another hex next to you. So you move them just a little bit to the left or right. That's still strong. Move 4, move an enemy. Fantastic. But the top is still the classic, I get invisibility, and my next attack while invisible does double damage. You get 2 experience from that, and it gives you dark, which is evidently something you need. It's the lost setup that we liked before. This one still is very good for, I kick open the door, I go invisible. Then next turn, boom, big attack. You still have that in your toolkit. They moved it to X, but I feel like it's still worth it. Trickster's Reversal has an initiative 9, and now it says the next time you would perform an attack against a shielded enemy. So this is something you set up. So you can put this in like a downturn. The next time you attack one, you do X plus 2 extra attack to it, where X is their shield value. So like if you are attacking like oh, here's a living spirit, they have shield 3. Congratulations, add attack 5 to it. They're going to die. You don't even have to rely on drawing. It doesn't matter. You can toss a basic attack. I say basic because it does say melee attack, so this doesn't work with your ranged attacks, unfortunately. But the cool part at the bottom is the next point of damage this round, boom, dodge it, which isn't any different than the original version. But the cool part about the top part is it is like, even though it is a persist infinite thing, you do get to hold on to it, and it's no longer a loss. The original Trickster's Reversal, as we can see here, it was a pretty heavy attack that could melt things, but now it's no longer a loss, which makes it, I personally think this is still very useful. So this is still a good card, especially if you are dealing with shielded enemies. I do think the Scoundrel's toolkit is roughly very similar to what it was before, but it's, I think personally, easier to use now, and now you have a little bit more versatility. You still have plenty of loot options, of course, but yeah, I'm just a big fan of the current development of this, so thank you. Mindthief, everyone's favorite rat, my favorite rat. Everyone, did you not love? Look how cute. Look how cute. Okay, maybe not like that cute, but like you don't get what I'm trying to say. Anyway, whole point is I personally had a lot of problems. I loved playing this, but I also had problems like, man, it would be great if more of these things were better. The mind's weakness is too powerful. Well, guess what? It's changed. No longer is it +2 to all attacks. It's now just +1. But as you can see, instead of the crappy attack 1, you still get the experience for playing it, but now it's an attack 2. So it's still an attack 3, 1 experience now. But now also, you get to control that enemy you just hit to perform an attack 2. This is a huge amount of burst. This is an attack 3 with an attack 2 baked in. Whew. Now, of course, you have to have that enemy adjacent to another thing, and they control it. So, like, you might not use your own modifier deck there, but hey, still good. The bottom, on the other hand, is still an attack 1 wound, which is still really useful if the other augments are useful. And guess what? They are. Withering Claw. It gives you an experience as well when you put it into play, but it also adds poison and wound to every attack, which is what we knew, but also immobilizes now instead of doing a weak attack 1. So now this is an attack 2, but it also will immobilize, wound, and poison, and every other attack after this will wound and poison. That's big. And now it's initiative 18, which is huge, but also you borrow from the old Submissive Affliction the ability to pick an enemy within range 4 and make them perform an attack 2. So Withering Claw now makes an enemy perform an attack on bottom, but alternatively on top you still have the buff it had before, but instead of an attack 1, now you attack 2 and immobilize. That's huge. So no longer do you really feel like Mind's weakness is necessarily mandatory, because this one allows you to potentially get hard crowd control on that, which is strong. So taking a look at Submissive Affliction, you can clearly see it's exactly as it was before. Now, this was slightly harder to use before because you didn't put too many debuffs out now, but you still had put plenty, so it wasn't like hard to use. But a lot of people just say Mind's weakness beats us out. You wouldn't like put the other things up. So, but this is a good follow-up for Withering Claw now. The bottom now steals the bottom of the old Parasitic Influence, where you can make an enemy within range 4 move 1. But now if you have ice, you can make them suffer 2 damage as part of it, which is big. That's really big, is that not? You can make them move 1, which could potentially put them out of range. You can potentially do 2 damage to them, and you could maybe even make them walk into traps. This one's got some uses. The whole point is, though, that you also have more ability to debuff enemies, especially because Mind's Weakness isn't necessarily the be-all, end-all now. You can use this with Withering Claw to now set up very heavy attacks with this. And also because they're poisoned, it's very easy if this attack 2 easily becomes an attack 5. Now, the experience is taken away, but we have those on the augments, which is good, because now this encourages you to play more augments instead of just playing Mind's Weakness and leaving it in play forever. Hidden in Shadows, so this clearly replaces Into the Night. Initiative 14 is great, but attack 3 with advantage is great. The thing is, if we're going to see, like, the attack numbers are going to look higher. Of course, that does mean that the +1 attack on the Mind's Weakness doesn't feel as big of a hit with these numbers being higher. So attack 3 with advantage, now with Mind's Weakness, that's attack 4 with advantage. Or with Withering Claw, that's attack 3 Poison Muddle with advantage. That's used. If you kill an enemy with this attack, perform Invisible Self. Fantastic. The bottom also says if you haven't moved this round, invis, and then you invis for the round, but then it falls off at the end. The cool part about that is first off, the bottom invis was just too strong. It was too powerful. Now, you're saying that the top of Hidden in Shadows, you have to actually be next to the enemy, gain an attack and stuff, and then you kill an enemy. Killing an enemy next to you and then gaining invis isn't nearly as powerful as on-command invis. So, although that top is powerful, it still has some asterisks next to it, and the usability is slightly less. So, there are going to be times where that top is very, very, very good, and there's going to be times where the top is, well, I went invisible, but I killed it, so now... Okay. It's still good. And the bottom is clearly nerfed, but it's still strong. Because this is just something you're going to want. Scurry! The only thing that's different is the attack's 1 higher, but again, with all the augments changing, this makes sense. Personally, I didn't think Scurry was a bad card to begin with. Most of the time with the Mind's Weakness, you'd move 3, attack 3, and now this, with the new one, is move 3, attack 3. I don't think there's so much else to say about it. Frigid Apparition. No longer is it an X card. It's a level 1 card. But also, where's the non-loss stun? Oh no, where's the beef? But no, Initiative 10, attack 3, infuse ice. You do actually need elements to play this class, I think, at its most effectiveness. Not like, you don't need it for a bunch of things, but there's a couple other cards, and we'll look at Perverse Edge later. But attack 3, infuse ice, Initiative 10. Fantastic. I personally think this is a good setup card for a lot of your other ones. But also the bottom is the same as it was before, but instead you have an attack 2. So move 4, stun, great. But move 4, attack 2, stun is fantastic. The thing is, since this is also tied to your non-loss ice generator, if you do burn this too early, you might harm your ice generation. But it does mean that if you play this later in the scenario, perhaps you can still use the stun an enemy, get your ice. So it's got some really good uses. That's a very strong bottom. Pilfer, move 4. Good. Remember, this was kind of like taken from level 4, but that level 4 card already had some good stuff attached to it. So regardless, attack 2. Did you kill them? If you didn't kill them, gain a money token from the supply. Fantastic. And then it doesn't matter if you killed the target or not. Loot 1 everything. I already liked like the Drifter's Violent Inheritance. The Drifter's and Violent Inheritance is so good. But so that's just an attack 3 loot 1 when you have Crushing Weight in play. This is an attack 2 loot 1 that might also get you a bonus money. So you can kind of see how I feel about this. Perverse Edge. Attack 3 and gain 2 attack for every negative condition on the target, and 1 experience for every negative condition on the target. That hasn't changed. The only bonus here is that you infuse ice. It's still at the Initiative 8. You can clearly see that this is just a strong card. The bottom, which used to be stun an enemy at range 2, perform an attack 1 on them, and get an experience and infuse ice, has slightly changed. As you can see, it's a move 3, but also if you consume ice, you get to stun an enemy before you move and gain an experience. So no longer is it an ice generator, it's an ice consumer. No longer is there an attack baked into it. There's no attack, and you need ice to get the experience. But there is a move baked in. Overall, this is largely what you want to use ice for, but sometimes it's harder to let the ice set up, and there's other uses for ice. But also you need to already be in melee with the enemy, and then you only move after the move. As a result, the ability for this to be usable is slightly less than it was before, but this card is still good. See, that's the thing. It went from an insanely overpowered level 1 card to just a good level 1 card. And I think that's fine. Empathetic Assault didn't change. You still have the move 2, heal 2, you still have everything that's blah blah blah. Nothing changed. Except one pretty big thing, and that's due to the enhancement rules changes. Remember, since we made those changes, this one only has a square pip on the heal now, and not just a generic pip from the old system. As a result, even though this card didn't change, the change in pips changes its use. It used to effectively have, in the old system, a diamond plus pip, and now it doesn't. So now you cannot build a strengthen into this. As a result, the people that used to, myself included, who relied on this as a way to get easy advantage on the Mindthief, are going to have to find other ways of getting multi-turn advantage. Usually you could very easily use this to set up 3 attacks with advantage, and now you can't do that. Does that make this card bad? No, this card's fantastic. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And also the initiative is 12 instead of 11, which is the tiniest. There's like 2 instances that make a difference there, but whole point is that the pip is notably more important. Psychic Blade. What's this? There's no augment named Psychic Blade. It's probably replacing this one, but your single target attacks may target enemies within 2 hexes of you. That's great. But then you also attack 3, curse. Great. And then you can move the enemy one by allowing them to move. This, you can push them into traps. You can move them next to you, you can like knock them towards your friends. You can knock them away from you. You have a lot of control over this. Because some people are like, I get to attack and move, push. Oh crap, can I push laterally? No, you can't. But this one allows you to control and move them in any direction. But not only that, but because this is a Psychic Blade and you put this into play first, they don't actually need to be next to you. So the funny part is, let's say you do, like, oh crap, I need that enemy next to me so I can stun them with Perverse Edge. Psychic Blade, boom, attack 3 and at range 2, boop, come to me, cool. Now you're stunned and I'm gonna jet out of here, ha ha ha. But also some of your other effects that you're like, hey, I wish I could attack the enemy, but I don't want to get hit. Boom, attack them at range 2. This is a really good card, but also it curses. And the bottom, move 3 and add curse to all your attacks this round. Ah, holy crap. I know melee attacks, but like, oh my goodness. So like, try to see if you can stack up a couple more melee attacks this round. But more often than not, the bottom basically is just move 3 curse. Feedback loop. So this one is no longer you could potentially get a bunch of shield, but only if you multi-attack and other. Yeah, it no longer does that. So now it's, after every melee attack abilities, grant one of your summons attack plus 0. Like, okay, we've got summons on this class now? The answer is yes! Like, I know previously people were like, the summons on this class suck. Why would we even consider that? Don't worry, they're better now. Trust me. But then you perform an attack 2 and grant a summon a move plus 0. And then after this attack, because you attacked 2, you get to grant them an attack plus 0. So that creates a fun feedback loop now. But seriously, attack 2, move, grant 1, then they get an attack. Your summon gets an attack plus 0, and then all your melee attacks grant attacks from this point on. If your summon has an attack value of 2 or greater, that means that this one potentially, if set up right, has the highest like effort potential basically out of all of your augments, but it has a little bit of a condition tied to it, which is, in my opinion, perfectly fine. The bottom hasn't changed. The bottom of it hasn't changed, but the initiative's 51 now. 51 sucks, but jump 4 is great, and muddle every enemy if you started again. So it's either a crap ton of muddles or a jump 4, both of which are fantastic. Possession. No, so this one is, instead of a big attack 6, this is now control an enemy to attack 3, muddle one of its friends. It's still a melee attack, so we can see why this is like an X card, because it's harder to get that set up. Initiative 71, move 3, and grant a summon move 2 is still good. Again, where's the summon? this next card. Gnawing Horde, rats, rats, rats. Initiative 82, move 4, which is fantastic, but also move 5, but also health 5, move 2, attack 2, and then the attack 2 also poisons. So the cool part about this is you could potentially have an attack 2 poison. If you can keep this thing alive and not killing things, attack 2 poison on every turn as a bonus from having the summon alive, which is great. But also, when you have feedback loop in play, that means every time you perform an attack, you can grant this another attack 2 poison. And if it's already poisoned the enemy, this could grant it another attack 3. This can add up to a lot of damage, but you need to be able to keep this 5 hit point summon alive. You'll have some better toolkits about keeping your summons alive later, but personally, I think the Gnawing Horde is now actually a viable summon. I don't know what's going on here. The whole point is you can go rat summoning build. You can go kind of like a rowdy, more control build, but you also can do a lot of damage. It really depends on how you want to build it, but you actually have options now, and you actually can rotate between the augments. And I honestly think it's better if you don't just play your favorite augment over and over, but use them to the best tool in your toolkit that's appropriate for where your allies are, what enemies there are, and where they are, because you can use that to great potential. Now I'm by Cragheart. So this one's a little bit special to me because this is the first character I got to play. And see, I'm just very attached to the class. It's one of my favorites. Seeing the new art of it, it just warms my heart. Did they change it? Do I like it? Let's just go over it now. So opposing strike. So it's still an attack 3 that attacks on both sides, but yes, you can see there's pips that you can potentially make this much wider. But it's moved from diagonal to horizontal, which is whatever. I prefer the diagonal, but not straight. Anyway, now the experience isn't built into it. You have to have earth to do it, but also it's an attack 4 on both sides and muddle if you have earth, which is really good. So, it does require a little bit more earth reliance than before, but it's already pretty solid. And now, the bottom, instead of giving yourself retaliate like a tanky beast, now and at the end of your next 4 turns, perform a heal 2. The big part about this is this allows you to actually be a little bit more tanky because you can keep going in, heal yourself, and then keep going, remove those poisons. But also, it's a heal 2 at range 2. So let's say you do top yourself off, you can start healing your friends. Or let's say you're in good health, but the other melee people are around you not. You can just stay close to me. I'm going to keep healing you every time I go. So at worst, this is because you can target things. You can get about 10 health and 3 experience from this. But not only that, but it's just a good bottom card. I personally think this is going to be better for the tools for the Cragheart in the long run than just giving it hey, you have retaliate on a card. So this one just fits the theme better. Crushing Grasp. So that attack 3 immobilizes now, and attack 4 immobilize. Attack 4 immobilize generator. So at the bottom, the bottom, which used to just be a loot 1 with nothing. Now it's a loot 1, infuse earth, create an obstacle, and all enemies adjacent to the obstacle suffer a damage? That's just choice. So that's just Crushing Grasp. Used to be, I don't move lost. Boom! Here, have a boulder. Take some damage. I'm gonna scoop up this gold, and guess what? I have earth now, bitch, and I'm gonna use it against you. Next round. Why? Because I'm Cragheart. I'm just really excited over this. I'm sorry if I got a little bit too energy. We're gonna move on to the next card. I love this new one. Avalanche! So the bottom used to be create 2 obstacles. It's clearly not. You clearly have the heal 2 range 3 from Earth and Claude that's been moved to this now. The top, however, is the same. Attack 4 with the potential to attack 5 on 2 targets if you have Earth. But now it's attack 6 on 2 targets. So it's a little bit better if you have the Earth, but I never played Avalanche without the Earth basically. So potentially 2 attack 6s, but the bottom's a heal. Good card. Such a nice little Cragheart. Rumbling Advance! So everyone and their mom, well not many, but several people were like, why did this card change initiative in the RPG? Did you see the card they revealed? Why is the initiative? Do you know why the initiative's different? Because we're overhauling the game, babe. We're changing everything. We're making the Cragheart different. You thought that initiative 38 was big? Oh boy, do I have news for you. But other than that, I know I was just talking about big change. But this card, the initiative's 38 now. Everything else is the same. But this is your good non-loss Earth generator. You have plenty of others, but this one's just universal. The bottom allows you to move, generate earth, and hit an enemy. The top allows you to heal and generate earth, you know. It's a good card. Anyone who played the Cragheart before knows that the fact that this hasn't changed should be a sigh of relief. Massive Boulder is range 2 now. Well, it was still good before, it's still good now, but it's a little bit harder to use, but that's okay. Honestly, it just kind of encourages you to stick a little bit closer to the enemies anyway. It's still it's still a move 4, so it's still good. Backup ammunition is unchanged. Honestly, like some parts of the Cragheart didn't need to be. This class was already super fun, super versatile, that it didn't need a lot of adjustments. So the fact that like Massive Boulder and Backup Ammunition got through with no changes, I think says a lot. And of course we have Earthen Bulwark. Earthen Bulwark. What a new card! What is going on here? But look at this. Create 2 obstacles within range. Fantastic. This gives you top obstacle dropping, which is something like you had like some obstacle dropping that allowed you, but it had to be adjacent to you. And now you have the ability to chuck obstacles without like having to level up and pick the card that everyone picked at later levels, because everyone knew like, hey, I've created a rock maze. Good luck. Now you're going to fight us one-on-one, but don't worry, my ranged Tinkerer and Spellweaver are going to be blasting you while you walk to me along this maze I created. Guess what? You can still do that now, and it's so fun. And the top allows you to damage your friends. They do get warned in the process, but I do like the idea of like, hey guys, take a damage. Also, you're warded, so you're gonna prevent the next 1 or so damage. Sorry, guys. Honestly, the like Cragheart cheesing people build has always been kind of fun for me. Like, don't stand next to him. Also, don't stand next to me, but also not there. It's back, baby. But the bottom is nice because you get a move 2, but then you get to perform a heal 1 within range, so you can like you can like pop poison wound or something off of a person. So I personally think that's nice. The initiative 41's fine. It's a pretty good card. It gives you some of the ability to check out boulders at level 1 at range instead of having to rely on avalanche, which is something I just never really. It was good, but I just didn't like it. So I'm glad we have it different now. Unstable Upheaval, as you can see here. The top hasn't changed, and the bottom got a buff, and it got +1 move. Other than that, the card doesn't look like it changed at all. So the fact that one of the cool part is the ability to attack all adjacent enemies and then use a earth to attack all within range 2. That's something I always loved. So being able to retain this on its initiative 13, fantastic. And moving from a move 2 to a move 3, super big. So let's move on to the next card since this one clearly doesn't have any other changes. Crater, the symbology looks different, but guess what? The card hasn't changed. Still, you're going to be doing an attack 3 at range 3. If you consume the earth, you get to knock them away further. Fantastic. And the bottom's still that big thing where you create a big boom, 1 damage to everyone next to you. Jump 4, boom, 1 or 2 more damage. Always love this card. The top was sometimes very useful, especially when like we had enemies like, aha, there's traps on the door beyond, but like now I'm gonna like move next to it, like boom, congratulations for clearing our traps for you. Also take 3 damage plus the trap, and you're all the way over there now. Have fun walking back at 2 health. I'm gonna punch you later. So love the top of this. The bottom always ended up being like a fun boom, boom setup thing, and I would then follow it up with another attack. Loved it. Dirt Tornado hasn't changed, except there's no pip on it anymore. Look at that. The lack of a pip, not even like a square pip. This one, they didn't even give it the dignity of a square pip. The pip is just gone. I know if you're like, well, I didn't really enhance this card. If you didn't enhance this card, what were you doing, babe? Babe, like, you had this whole thing to yourself. You had the ability to chuck anything on it. You could put like disarm if you were weird, but you could have put like wound or poison or like the more popular curse. You could just toss it on this card. Hon, what were you doing? What were you doing? Just think, if you didn't notice that the pip was missing, then I don't. It's in my opinion pretty big. Earth and Clod. So that bottom's gonna look different, but we clearly saw the heal move up to Avalanche. But the top, hey, guess what? It's the same. Long range immobilize. Long range immobilize is fantastic because not only like, hey, stay over there, you're not going to be doing anything this turn because you're not moving closer. Also, I'm going to tickle you with a little bit of an attack while we do it, and I get experience. Love it. Glad it wasn't changed much. It's pretty good. But you can clearly see the initiative from Rumbling Advance. has moved down to this. So this one's a 29, which I personally think is an improvement for this specific card. But yeah, so the initiative got better, the top's the same, but the bottom now is an attack 3 at range 5. So now you have a significant attack with long range. But now that attack 3 becomes stronger for every obstacle next to the target. So if you did create that maze or have the ability to like chuck out a bunch of obstacles around it, you're like, hey, guess what? You're surrounded by dirt. Guess what? Now I'm going to bury you. And then probably like scoop up the points after, you know. Anyway, I love that we have this now. That are like, he's literally throwing boulders that are making more boulders collapse, and you have just the flavor on this theme is on point, is what I'm trying to say. Heaving swing, so that top looks the same, doesn't it? Heaving swing, so that top looks the same, doesn't it? It is, that's why. Not much to say about it, it's still good. I do think with the ability to make obstacles a little bit more reliable, I think this card becomes a little bit more... This card just gets better because I think you just have the capacity to use it more reliably. The bottom is harder to do because you can still set up obstacles pretty nicely, but now you destroy an adjacent obstacle, great. You suffer a damage, not great. But then, during this turn, you get +3 to your next melee attack. So, if you do like, haha, I've created the obstacle maze. Now one enemy has got next to me. Cool, I'm gonna destroy this obstacle, and this attack 4 is now an attack 7. Die. Yeah, you're gonna take a damage in the process, but like 1 damage is worth adding a significant thing to it. It is a little bit harder to use overall, which is of course why this is an X card and not a level 1 card. Still very strong. Petrify, here's a new card. Attack 4 at range 3 at this formation. Now this is probably placing Forceful Storm because it is an attack at range 3, but now it's attack 4 in that cone instead of attack 3, and there's no disarm though. Oh no! And there's no wind being generated. Oh no! Still an attack 4 in everything in that hex and gives you earth, what you want, but then every enemy that dies in it becomes an obstacle instead. So the cool part is you like throw rocks over there, you do a lot of damage, and if they die, they become obstacles. You turn them into boulders. It's cool. I love. First off, again, the theme is on point. Oh god. Cragheart, my king. And the bottom allows you to do an attack 2 at range 2, which is already pretty okay. But now you have a bottom attack, which is great. But if you have earth, you can attack 2 out to range 4, which is fantastic, and you get an experience for that. So personally, I think Petrify is a really solid card. I can't wait to play more of it. Honestly, when we play Gloomhaven 2nd Edition, I do think this is... it'll be so fun to revisit my favorite starter, but it's all going to be over again. I'm sorry, I'm a little excited. Whew, Rock Tunnel. So now you have another healing card, the Initiative 64. All right. Heal 2, target 2, range 3. This is very similar. We've already seen this on other classes, so this is kind of like the base multi-target heal at level 1, which is fine. However, the bottom got buffed from what it was before. Now it's a jump 7. Jump set, first off, non-lost jump 7 is great. It also compares to the Tinkerer's lost jump 8. But instead, this time, this says, if you consume earth as part of this, you get to immobilize all the enemies you move through. So jump 7, consume earth, immobilize all these enemies. Go off, king. So we love that. So this is really great if you need to like, all right, kick open the door into this room. I'm gonna move to this specific spot. All those guys are immobilized, punch you, and then set up a really big thing for the next turn. One of the big things I think if people noticed is there was like the thing, there were 2 different auras. I did go over changing these cards, but 2 different auras self buffs that were like, I had +2 to all my melee attacks this round, or I had +1 to all my ranged attacks this round from Heaving Swing and Forceful Storm. And people are like, hey, that's absent if you paired those together, but they required you to not move, and they ended up just not being as fun. So tuning some of the numbers higher, but taking those tools away, and instead giving different bottoms, just kind of made it a little bit better. So, Cragheart, really excited. I think this is when we actually do start our official campaign. I think this is going to be what I will be playing for my first character. Honestly, we're really excited. The weird part is, this is just the beginning. Gloomhaven 2nd Edition has so many changes associated with it. Be excited over the month of June. We're going to be revealing more information about Gloomhaven 2nd Edition, the Gloomhaven RPG, and all this other fun stuff. And if you want to, I'll actually be at Origins Game Fair on June 20th when this campaign launches. And I will be at the Cephala Fair booth. I will be a Gloom Master for the RPG. So if you sign up, you can play with me at Origins, and I'll be running a table, I think, in 2-hour segments. So if you're interested in that, come to Origins and maybe just say hi. I loved it. Honestly, at PAX East, it was wonderful to talk to all of you. It was amazing. I'm super hyped for this project. I'm very excited, and I want to hear what you have to say. So if you have thoughts on like some of the classes, just let us know. But if you have thoughts on some of the locked classes, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm already aware of them, so I'm not going to spoil anything, not going to confirm anything, but boy, I want to hear your thoughts. And if you do talk about locked classes and spoilers, be sure to spoiler block your comments below. So just be courteous to other people. Wow. So that was a lot of talking. I'm sorry if that went a little over long, but I'm personally super excited. You couldn't tell from my energy, this is something I've known about for some time. I've just been holding it close to the chest, and oh my goodness, it's just, I am so glad that we're finally able to talk about it. So be sure to check out the Gloomhaven RPG and 2nd edition, and thank you so much for watching. Please hit like, it does actually help the channel and help these videos. So I'm gonna wait for that a bit, but also thank all of you, and thank to my Inox tier patrons. You guys are amazing. Thank you for supporting it. I don't actually keep the Patreon money. I put it all in a medical fund to help support my transition. So thanks to all of you for being wonderful people and helping me pay for my medical bills, which is unfun, but like, I'm so glad you guys on Patreon, you're so fantastic, and thank you so much. Thanks for being amazing, and thanks all of you for watching.